Within the earth, from waters blue, fairies are whispering to me and to you.
Hello there, hello there, hello there, hello there.
I'm Claire Casely, the Fairy Whisperer. In the air of sylvan nights, we'll find our way by fairy light. Fairies whisper throughout the land. It's time to walk hand in hand. To catch a fairy whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello, welcome to the Fairy Whispering Podcast, and I'm really excited to have Meri Dixon with me today, who's a fairyologist, and we've been in touch for a while on social media, and we followed each other's work, haven't we, Meri?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, but we don't know much about each other apart from the fairy interest, and just wanted to invite Meri on because you've been doing some fairy research and just hear about your connection with fairies. So welcome, Meri.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honoured.
Lovely to have you on. Sorry, where does your connection with fairies start? Where does that come from?
Funny one, because it wasn't my intention to research the fairies, but I do have a long connection, probably like many people, back with childhood. My strongest connection with fairies comes from the brownies, from the brownie guides, which I don't know if you know. If you're a brownie, you know that it is all based around fairy folklore. So the brownies were supposed to be helpers, and you sort of age between about 7 and 10. I think that's the age group. So probably, I suppose, the most profound time of imagination and interest in the world. And I just remember being absolutely terrified that they were going to come and visit me, all the different fairies that are named, because each group, so you put into sixes, and each six is named after a fairy. So a sprite, an imp, which isn't really a fairy, I suppose, a pixie, and you have all these different groups. And I just remember I had the Brownie Guide handbook in those days, so I'm talking 1970s, hardback, very official looking, quite big book, and it had a picture of the fairies dancing on the page, and it also said things like, the fairies will enter your life, and I was terrified that they would. I really had very strong imagination. I was convinced. I always picked up on things, although there's no real connection within my family. I'm the only religious one, and I'm the only one that's been interested in spirituality, although my mum did in later life. She tried out a lot of things. So I have no one to talk to about this. And in fact, I thought if I talk to people about this, they'll think I'm mad. So I was convinced that fairies existed, and I don't think I ever stopped. When my daughter was born, and when she was about 3 or 4, we bought a How to Attract Fairies book that we'd seen in the shop, and we followed the instructions. It was mostly planting flowers in pots, and that would encourage the fairies, which I thought was a lovely idea. And also how to name your cat. According how witches name their cats, and how to name your cat, which is not fairies, but we were in that zone. So that was nice. I liked encouraging all of the boys as well to a certain extent, but it was a special connection with my daughter to have the fairies in our lives. And so I suppose, like many people, it's in the background. You believe in it, but you leave it alone. So the research thing was by accident, I suppose. Originally, I wanted to look at religious experiences in general, people who have an encounter with Jesus or with angels, or see Jesus's face on a piece of toast.
Yes, I know.
There's
Yeah.
all sorts of
Yeah.
experiences, aren't there? And I was
Mm.
very interested in that. And I'd just finished looking at spirituality, and because it was COVID, I'd had loads and loads of people for my survey. My supervisor said, "Oh, you only need about 80 or 90," and I had 500, over 500 respondents, because everyone was, "Oh yeah, let's do a survey. We're so bored." And so I think that's what I was hoping to do, was to survey people's experiences. But I was lucky enough to have Professor Linda Woodhead as one of my supervisors, who's quite quite a big force in the Church of England and also in academia. And she was at Lancaster at the time, although she moved down to London. And she said, "Well, there seems to be an awful lot of stuff going on with fairies." And I said, "All right, I've not read anything for many years apart from that one book. Why don't you look into that?" So I did, and it just, I mean, the internet is horrible for lots of reasons, but it's also wonderful. You put that thing into the search engine, and you just this wonderful array of information comes out. And the first port of call was the Fairy Investigation Society, and I found the Fairy Census, and I just thought, I can't believe this. People are seeing fairies. People are having experiences. What on earth is going on? Why haven't I? Which is always always a question.
Yes.
And I ran back, to Linda the next day and said, "Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do," because I'd had such success with this, asking people about their spirituality of the seaside, of why the sea was so important. I thought, I'll do the same with fairies. And she said, "Yeah, there's probably not." I said, "There's a big survey online," and she said, "Yeah, but perhaps people haven't really written about it. They just maybe talked about, oh, isn't this interesting, but maybe not looked into it as a cultural or sociological thing." I know that to not really be true now, having met you, having met lots of people who are, but I still think, at least what I was trying to convey, this was to try and show people who just weren't interested in spirituality, look at what's going on in the world. That for the people that are interested in fairies, there's a real rich seam of work, both history, folklore, and then the spiritual side, which I do examine a lot. So that, but it was completely separate from this initial childhood connection. But I'm really glad. As I said, it's been my life now for nearly 5 years. And before that, though, I'd not had any real inkling, apart from on a very superficial level.
Yeah, the fairies. Oh my gosh, that is compiled by Dr. Simon Young, of course, and
Yes.
it's all online, everyone. So if you put in Fairy Census, Fairy Investigation Society, it will come up and you can download it, read it. There's also another website, fairycensus.com, where you can actually analyze the data in it, can't you? You can go through.
Like a spreadsheet, and you can
Which is
mix it up.
wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's been, I've said that in the acknowledgements. I've said, if it hadn't been for Simon Young, I don't think this would have existed, because I couldn't have compiled such a. I did start out trying to interview people, but then I thought, well, and I have got some interesting stuff, but not on such a vast scale. But I thought the data's there, and luckily it's quite up to date. He goes as far as 2020, the 2020s, but 2024, I think he published the second one. So
I think
just a wealth of.
I think it's because it's something we just don't talk about openly,
No.
even now. Like you were saying, there's only certain people I could talk about this with. Same for me growing up. I sort of was interested in the paranormal, supernatural, but there was really only one person in my family I could talk to, which is my grandfather. And then it wasn't until I left school really that I sort of felt that I could
Yeah.
explore this
Yeah,
world.
I think that's,
Yeah.
I think it's a fear of being ridiculed or being
Mm,
told, as I often was for lots of things, oh, you're too old for that now. You've grown past that. And I thought if I start
yeah.
talking about fairies, that it's that
Yes.
idea which is sadly the way sticks, that it's for children only. I mean, of course it's lovely for children, but it is also an adult interest, and there's so many wonderful, interesting things for all
Yes.
ages. And I
Yes.
do feel sad that it's just been consigned to the nursery, as if, oh, it's just
Mm.
childish.
It's a
um
misconception, isn't
it's a
it?
good start for children.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think, a lot of people perhaps think, oh, I won't talk about that because it's considered childish. That's one of the
yeah,
barriers, isn't it? But it's not. Fairies are for everyone, for all ages of people. There's
absolutely.
people I know in their 80s that, have had fairy experiences. So, yeah, it's not just consigned to children and the imagination, and we don't know what the imagination is. It's a huge thing, isn't it? But I'd love to hear about your research and your perspective on these things and what you've discovered through, looking into fairies and people's beliefs about fairies. Mm,
Yeah, I think it did very quickly become, the focus was always going to be on these experiences,
mm,
and my wonder that people were having these experiences. But I realized very early on that wasn't going to make an entire thesis. It was
mm,
going to stretch it a bit. And my supervisor who took over from Linda, Chris Partridge, who in a way was probably, I mean, Linda's um, pedigree is impeccable, but she's very much in the religious studies area. Now, Chris Partridge has done much more research in unusual areas. He's looked at drug use, psychedelic drugs. He's looked at dub culture, and he's looked at UFOs and aliens, and in a way, with him, it was the meeting of two minds. I mean, his
mm,
is colossal, but he really got what I wanted to try and do, and he steered me much more in looking at the effect of fairies on culture. So that's where I went. So
mm,
I still wrote about the experiences that people had, but I was able to contextualize it within. And I would have gone, British culture, but they always tell you to narrow it down. So I
mm,
focused on English culture, because I think Irish tradition is very different. The Welsh and Scottish tradition have similarities, but again, they have their own cultural narrative. So I thought, well, why not do
yes,
England?
mm,
And especially the North. I'm from the North, the Northern fairies that tend to have almost their own little enclave as well up here. Um, I did include Cornwall. I know technically Cornwall probably considers itself much more of a separate place, but
mm,
I thought,
mhm.
oh, let's just go with the way maps are
Yeah,
drawn at the moment, and hopefully they'll forgive me.
yes, yeah.
Um, so yes, and as these things happen, as you start to connect, a perfect quote came up in one of my readings that seemed to encapsulate what I wanted to do, and it was from the book uh, Elf Elf Queens and Holy Friars by Richard Firth Green, which is
Mm,
basically a fantastic book that plots the history and folklore of fairies in the medieval period, and it's
okay.
wonderful to read anyway. Anything medieval, I think the medieval period is the most fascinating. It's my
Yes.
favourite.
Yeah.
And he'd taken a quote from C.S. Lewis, who'd said, we've got to start looking at fairies seriously, we've got to start tackling them. And he was writing that in the early 60s. And takes the quote that I use, so hopefully, and give credit to Richard Firthbury from his book, is it's the task is not, I'm reading it off the wall because I have it over
Oh,
my
great.
computer as well. The task is not to establish what they represent, what fairies represent, or exemplify, or epitomise, but rather to ask, what are they and what cultural work are they doing? And I was like,
Yes.
yes, that's it. That's my thesis.
Yeah.
And that's
Amazing.
basically been what I've done. I've split it into two. So I've looked at the fairy experiences, what people saw, what kind of
Mm.
people saw fairies, and the answer to that is anybody can see fairies. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's like Ratatouille, he says
Yeah.
anybody can cook, but meaning that you can come from any background, any
Yes.
education, and that's
Mm.
certainly true. And so that's what I did. I did a historical overview, and it's lovely. I mean, it's a little bit, I suppose it's a little bit superficial, but you can trace almost an evolution of fairy belief, how fairies have changed over the different epochs. So going from Anglo-Saxon, when the first records are, I mean, there's fairies before, of course,
Mm.
but the first records were in medical journals written by the Anglo-Saxons on how
Really?
to cure elf shot.
Oh,
Yeah, and
yes.
they were in, and so
Yes.
it's so they're in
Uh-huh.
the poetry, but
Mm.
they're in these medical journals, and they are
Yeah.
they're recipes for medication. So when your cow gets shot,
Yeah.
or yourself, but it
Mm-hmm.
was usually animals, this is what you needed to do.
Yeah.
And it always included a little prayer, which I also thought was quite nice. When you're making the concoction, which is
Yes.
mostly herbal, I think
Mm-hmm.
I've got it written down somewhere, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But there was always a prayer involved in that the animal would be healed and cured. And so we go back to the 6th century, and then you watch as the fairies sort of come alive. That nobody sees them, or barely sees them, maybe
Mm.
hears them. And then gradually, in the medieval period, they see big visions of courts. And then in the early modern period, they become this force for evil,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting because there's a huge conflation between the witch trials. A lot of witches saying that they
Yes.
had, wasn't me, it was the
Mm.
fairies, in the hope, I suppose, that they'd be exonerated, and they weren't.
Mm.
They shouldn't have spoken to them at all. And then gradually it becomes romantic. It becomes all about, they go back to chivalry, and then the Victorians, of course, who go two ways, don't they? Really,
Mm.
they on the one hand they make them smaller and put them in the
Yes.
nursery, but they also make them brighter. You have these
Mm.
massive electric, because electricity was magic.
Mm-hmm.
They had these theatrical performances. Apparently, there were 5,000 children employed across the country at Christmas as
Really?
fairies.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
and I was stunned. This is Diane Purkis, whose book, again, Troublesome Things, is an amazing book.
Oh, I've
She's got
heard of
such
her.
a,
Yes, I want to read
yeah,
it. Yeah.
she was on, I first heard her talking, like when you start some research, you start
Mm-hmm.
hearing about fairies from everywhere, and you think, well,
Yeah.
how is this happening? And she was on Melvin Bragg's Radio 4 program In Our Time, talking about
Oh,
fairies,
right.
and she
Okay.
is the authority.
Mm.
Definitely. But she talked about, and of course it was, child labor. Of course they were wired, they were covered in, and it's not like the fairy lights we get today. These were
Oh my
heavy,
gosh.
burning hot light bulbs being pinned to children, to their clothes, to their bodies, so that they would light up. And yeah, they were not living the fairy life, definitely. But obviously they were
Mm.
enchanting the lives of richer, more
Yes.
lucky children, I
I
suppose.
I didn't
So the
know. Yeah.
Victorians, yeah, they
Mm.
incorporate their love of, I don't even know what to call it, torture. They just, like,
Torture.
in order to make something beautiful, they tortured 5,000
Oh my
children,
gosh. Well, chimney
to make these
sweeps and
amazing
yeah.
displays. You can just imagine burns. Yeah, absolutely. So
Mm.
yeah, so unfortunately, fairy entertainment was very exploitative. But you sort of go, oh yeah, that sounds about right for the time period. So yeah, so I did a historical overview. I looked at the principal folklore as well, and some of it is really delightful, and some of it is terrifying, as we know.
Mm.
We know the stories of fairy. You're lucky, I think, if you meet a fairy who just wants to trick you and have a laugh. You're
Mm.
not so lucky if you meet, someone who wants to kidnap you, take you away, or kidnap your
Mm.
child and replace it with a changeling. And some of the
Mm.
changeling stories are
Yeah,
horrific.
they
Uh,
are.
and
Mm.
I think I've read a few, and obviously the Burning of Bridget Cleary is a wonderful
Mm.
book, very
Mm.
detailed, just
Mm.
terrible, but also gave such a great insight into what people believe. Because in fact,
Yes.
the husband and the family who tortured and burnt her because believing, they were actually their sentences were commuted from murder to manslaughter, because the judge said it is clear, however misguided, these people really believed in what they
Mm.
were doing. They weren't doing this out of spite or hate.
Mm.
They were convinced, and apparently the husband was constantly going outside, waiting till midnight for the fairy train to come by so he could rescue his wife. So it's fascinating, but also,
Gosh.
again, horrific.
Mm.
So the
Mm.
story of fairy, so that's what I sort of looked at. So
Yes.
and I think most a lot of people now are becoming aware of how violent and dangerous fairies, the history of fairies is. We
Mm.
start with them shooting cattle and farmers. Although there's what one theorist, I can't remember who it was, who basically said, well, they weren't necessarily trying to hurt people and cattle. They were trying to draw attention to the fact that you're ruining nature with your farming methods. And I
Mm.
think I like to believe that. I like to think, they were
Yes.
doing it for a good cause. But
Mm.
so a lot of that was fascinating. And then I tried to and again, I can say what fairies are. I think
Mm.
every person who was interviewed was asked what is a fairy.
Yeah.
Not everyone answered, but everyone gave a different kind of answer. Some similar, some talked about energy, some talked about unseen.
Mm.
You could categorize them. But what fairies are is as numerous as the fairies, really,
Mm. Mm.
which I've sort of said. But then looking at culture, I wanted to try and not just generally say, well, we have people have fairy parties, we have fairy lights, fairy cakes. I wanted to look at specific fairies, so I chose the three I thought fairies influenced the most, and that was nostalgia,
Mm.
for which there is quite a big academic study in general. So that was very helpful, just getting some background. Nostalgia, enchantment,
Oh yeah.
and
Mm.
spirituality. So I looked at those three areas in
Interesting.
detail in the second part of this. And fairy spirituality is definitely the direction I think fairy belief is going. Fairies being consulted now in a way that
Mm.
they weren't perhaps in the past. I think in the early modern period, when people went to the cunning folk, they went to the man or the woman. They didn't go to the fairy. They knew
Mm.
that they
Mm.
could that this person, this cunning man, cunning woman, the local wise person, was the only person who could ask for that. But now it's
Mm.
very much, and I think it takes its impetus from theosophy, really,
Mm.
that there is an
Mm.
energy realm that fairies live in, and that you can consult it, and you yourself and
Mm.
people like Karen Kay as well, with the fairy oracle cards. There's this
Mm.
sense that you can ask fairies for advice. I
Mm.
don't know if that's a good way to go, but that seems to be
Yeah.
the way that belief is going. And maybe that's because well-being and mindfulness are very strong in our
Mm.
way that we deal things now, which I think is a good thing.
Mm.
Good that people are
Yes.
finding spiritual well-being, and fairies seem to be becoming a bigger part of that, which is fine. I think
Mm.
that's I've
Yeah.
I've used the fairy cards on my friends and had
I
some
mean,
interesting interactions.
I've got quite a lot of fairy cards, but I
Yeah, I've just got the
also,
one.
yeah, I'm also cautious with, because we don't know what they are really, who they are.
Yeah,
There's various theories and there's, different types of fairies, like
yeah,
different types of people. So I think respect is the key with dealing with
yes,
any
absolutely.
any otherworldly being.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean that
Respect.
would I think that
Mm,
would be certainly true.
yeah.
I find it interesting that
Mm,
people would want to consult a supernatural entity. But I wonder why fairies, angels, I get it, yes, because
mm,
angels are come from God and they're good and they're bound to give you good advice and maybe consulting, your family members that have passed away as well. That
mm,
seems sensible. But fairies, I don't know. I don't know. The iteration of fairies that we probably
mm.
are used to the naughty fairy, the fairy that wants to trick you and trip you up and lead you into the
Yes.
mire and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Perhaps no, I don't really want your
Pixies.
advice.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I do think
Mm.
I'd avoid those. But the idea of the beautiful fairy, and this
Yes.
I do deal with the way that the word fairy has changed its meaning, and now it means that little fluttery, pretty ballerina type.
Mm.
We talk, and I think that's why a lot of people now start talking about the fae to perhaps
Hmm.
differentiate
Mm.
from the fairy, because I think it would be true of most people. If I went out into the street now and said, "What's a fairy?" I think most people would say little wings, ballerina,
Do,
tiara,
do you think
and
that's
I think
the,
fae.
sorry, Mary, do you think that's the influence of popular culture like Disney, for example,
Yeah,
Victorian?
I do. I, I do, yeah. I mean, it's true, and we've become such a visual culture, haven't we,
Mm,
since cinema took off,
mm,
and not always in a bad way. I don't begrudge it, but we learn. We used to learn in lots of different ways, and now everything is in front of what we see. And
mm,
if you're,
hmm.
if you're able to see, that is how all the information comes at you. And of course Disney had its, you know, did the twinkly thing, but and being so popular as
Mm.
well, I think that's it was inevitable that was going to happen. I think Cottingley certainly
Yes,
helped
of
with that as
course.
well. The
Yeah.
kind of designs that the girls in the end chose to
Yeah.
represent. But that whole Art Deco period is interesting because if you think about, I was thinking about this because I wanted to. Somebody
Mm.
had said modernism killed fairies. I think it was Diane Purkis again, and I wanted to say no. So I tried to look for Art Deco, and Art Deco created so many beautiful fairy
Mm.
women. And the Rolls Royce emblem, the thing that sticks on the radiator, the spirit of destiny, is a fairy. It's got
Yes.
wings, it's beautiful, it's half kid.
Mm.
And I think Art Deco, if we're going to talk about modernism, you can't say Art Deco isn't modernism.
No.
Art Deco did embrace that and had these beautiful figurines. If you think about the
Yes.
lamps and
Yeah.
some of them were fairies and represented
Mm.
like that. So yeah, but I think that's the way that the culture seems to be going, and I think this
Mm.
is why there is a divide now, and if you're in the know you probably say fae, and
Mm.
then you imagine that encompasses all the other different kinds of fairy beings or fairy-like. I've sort of said fairy and fairy-like beings
Mm.
because I didn't really want to confuse people.
Yeah.
That
I don't
that's
know. Yeah,
um, that's
I
what I
find
found. Yeah,
Faye.
I think Faye does sound a bit more grown up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Faye.
I find that confusing. I mean, Fae,
Mm, okay.
fairies. I tend to use the archaic form of fairy, the
With the AE spelling. Yeah.
Fairieie.
Yeah.
See, for my logo, and I use Fairy Whispering, my website, Fairy Whispering, because just so people can find me, basically.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
practical reason. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think fairy for me encompasses all types of fairies and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
place as well, the place where
Yes, of
they
course,
mention
because
where they're
it was
from.
known as fairy was Elfane, wasn't it? Elfland,
Yes.
and it was fairyland before it was the people of
Mm,
fairyland being
mm,
fairies, and I find that really interesting because
yeah.
language is how that's how we express ourselves. That's how we communicate. We can't do it any other way, and so I think it's interest. I think it's important
Mm,
to look at the word itself. I mean, I'm with you. I would say fairies encompasses all the things that people have said to them is a fairy.
yeah.
But I also think the first answer
Mm.
tends to be that, yeah, the
Well,
fluttery, tweaky
it's the same.
Tinkerbell type.
Yeah, it's the same thing with, say, pixies. If I
Yes,
said
true.
to
Yeah,
somebody in America, "Oh, I've been researching about pixies," they might think of Tinkerbell because she was
yeah, because she
identified
has
as
pixie dust,
a
doesn't she?
pixie. Yeah.
They call it pixie dust, even though she's a
Yes.
typical fairy, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, she
So
does have wings, doesn't she? Has wings
she
in
has wings.
Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, I think yes, I think pixies and elves is an interesting one as well because, of course, we've got Tolkien elves who are these
Mm.
beautiful warrior
Mm.
princes and princesses. Uh, and then we've got Dobby, the house elf, is a
Yes.
completely different thing. And also the fact that fairies, or what we call fairies now, were called elves up
Mm.
until Shakespeare's time. Really, it was
Yeah.
they were known as elves. I mean, Shakespeare intersperses it.
Mm.
His and again, Midsummer Night's Dream is really interesting because he mixes and matches. He has the royal fairies, but he also has the Warwickshire fairy, the Puck, which would have been. I think I think there were places in Warwickshire. It's a slang term. Puck, poke, pook,
Hmm. Yeah.
were the Warwickshire dialect words for elves,
Hmm.
and he calls. Yeah, I think he calls Puck interchangeably fairy, elf, um, that
Yes.
sort of thing. So yeah, so yes, I think you're right. I think each one of those words gives us an impression
Mm.
of what the entity, the creature would be like. And pixies, I mean, it sounds naughty, doesn't it? The
Yeah, it
word
does.
pixie.
Yeah, it does.
And elf,
Playful.
I suppose with the films, especially with Tolkien and
Mm.
being so popular, people's perception of elves became that. But then of course, um, yeah, and it's fine, so
Mm.
he's not. He's more like a pixie to me, the way he's been created in the films, anyway.
Sorry,
Um,
which one? Which character?
Dobby,
Dobby.
Dobby from
Yes.
Potter.
Well,
Yeah,
he's based on the
I feel
brownie.
like he's
Yeah,
yes. Well, they're called house elves,
that's
and
right.
I
Yeah.
know J.K. Rowling took a lot of folklore, like the boggart.
Mm.
I think she gets just about right.
Mm.
You never see a boggart in its normal state, because and apparently that is true. I did check that out to see
Mm.
if that was true, and it more or less. Simon Young, again, the expert in boggarts, he's done a boggart census. It's a lot smaller scale, but it's still
Oh,
interesting.
really? I didn't know about that
Yeah,
one. Mm.
yeah, it's on
Oh,
the source book is on the website, on the Fairy Investigation website. So yeah, I think you can buy the book. It's
Pocket
just called Boggart.
census.
I think you can buy that on Amazon.
Oh, yeah, I knew about the
And
book.
again,
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
yeah. But yes, he's done a mini. It's about 300 um, encounters that people. They're more. They're more. He said specifically he wanted to only look at the past, and he wanted to look at mostly people who were children when they encountered boggarts, and a lot of it is more what they were taught about boggarts. So don't go down by the river, the boggart will get you. Jenny Greenteeth is a boggart,
right? Yes,
ostensibly. Which is a good thing, because it was, be scared, she will lure you into the water and you'll drown. And that's a really good way to deter children from falling into water. So it's slightly different focus, but it's interesting that what he does. But yeah, go back to just the interpretations of elves, and I suppose in a way we could look at all of the different names, couldn't we? And there would be different interpretations.
Yes,
I think
definitely.
Yeah, I think pixies, obviously, that's your part of the world predominantly as well, isn't it? The southwest is where they're mostly encountered and talked about.
Yes. And then in another part of the country, somebody might say it's a brownie because they help in houses. It's very confusing, all the different
I mean, again, Simon's has two schools of thought. He said there's the lumpers and the splitters. And he said there's lumpers. He said, I have no time for lumpers, because they just think that all fairies are the same thing and everyone just calls them different. But he also said that the splitters, and he names Catherine Briggs here because she's so amazing. I mean, she comprehensively said every single name that you might give to a fairy entity. And he says, he thinks she may have called the same creature different things because in different parts of the country. So like a pixie in the southwest might be a brownie in the Midlands, or a sprite or whatever. But it's good to have this diversity of nomination. And it's, I think, again, in terms of folklore and in terms of our traditions, I think it's important to keep the names going. I think it's a shame, or it would be a shame, if everything just became fairy, which I suppose in his imaginations can be the case. So maybe, so having a book about pixies would be really good. It would be beneficial because it will highlight, look, here's the special attributes of this creature. And then we're not losing that tradition and that. I don't think we would, but you never know, because language gets so easily
well, that's
messed about with, especially with social media, people misnaming things or
that's why
misunderstanding them, and then it catches on, and then you're like, oh.
That's why I think that was my passion, really, to make sure that I wanted to do something really comprehensive.
I think that's what we all want to do. Those of us that are engaged in research and just enjoying being part of this fairy community is just really wanting to put it in one place so that so everybody can find it. And I think that's lovely. I like the tradition of self-publishing as well. People just throwing stuff out there on free sites, and I mean, we've all got to make a living, but I think people are very generous in their research. That they'll put papers out, they'll put blogs or podcasts out there so that it's available, so that people can access it and find out these amazing things. I mean, in 4.5 years, I've found out things I'd never imagined, and that's all thanks to you, to Joe Hickey Hall, to Simon Young especially, to the writers that have gone before, Walter Evans Wentz, Catherine Briggs, all of these people who in their passion, like you said, in their passion for these creatures and for the traditions that that we have. I mean, that still blows my mind. The fact that every culture has a little person tradition,
Yes, I
folklore,
know. I mean,
and it's
that's
crazy. And you just
amazing,
think,
isn't
well,
it? Yeah,
yeah.
it's
I mean,
worldwide.
I'd love to delve into that as well, and
Mm,
just why. I think it's Jeremy Hart. I might be going wrong here, but
mm,
Jeremy Hart says that they're not supernatural, they're natural. So if I'm wrong, anybody who knows who, I think it's Jeremy Hart says this, that
yeah.
they're on the side of nature, so they're part of
Mm,
us. And supernatural seems to imply a different world, a different realm, but that
yeah.
fairies are part of us. And I actually think that there's a lot of truth in that, because fairies look a bit like us. They do
Mm,
stuff like we do. They love
mm,
music. They love dancing. They do all those things. And
yes.
I like to think that they're another race of beings, but they're on
Mm,
our side of the fence.
mm,
But I mean,
I think
discuss,
so.
because I'm sure
Yeah.
some people would
I
disagree.
I think they're linked to us. I think Tolkien, with
Yeah,
his ideas about the elves and the race of men, the different races coming together, I think
yeah,
there's a lot of truth in that, that we are somehow connected. We're just in different planes of
yeah,
existence, or whatever people believe,
yeah.
whether they believe they're an actual little race of
Or
people that are
experience.
hidden away somewhere like the
Yeah,
Sasquatch, or whether they're more, I believe they're more on the supernatural side of things. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I think, I've spoken to other people that believe that very strongly as well. And why are more people wanting to engage with this subject now? Why are more people
yeah,
reaching for fairies or Sasquatch or UFOs?
yeah.
What's driving us? And I
Yeah,
think,
it's. I mean,
yeah,
it's true, isn't it, that
mm,
we're looking for we are looking for our answers outside of ourselves and outside of our experience, which
yeah,
I think is good.
mm,
I think it proves that people, okay, yeah, religion may be declining, but people are filling it. They're not filling it with materialism and atheism. They're
mm,
filling it with spirituality, with
yes,
worship of nature and worship of fairies
mm,
or
mm,
any other kinds of beings. And I think one of the writers that I read the most of preparing for my thesis was
mm,
Alistair Hardy, who
yes,
was an evolutionary biologist, and he
mm,
said belief in the supernatural, belief in the paranormal is part of our evolution. It's a
mm,
necessary part,
yes,
and it's fascinating. He was obviously doing that. He was writing about that in the 50s and 60s and lecturing about it.
mm,
And I find that really, I find it a good argument to throw at people when they say, oh, it's not scientific. It's like, well, actually,
yeah,
and that, his students later on, David Hay and Kate Hunt, went on to interview people about their religious experiences and set up
mm,
the
mm,
research, religious experience research unit, which
mhm,
was originally in London, in Oxford, but I think it's at Lampeter now. And they've got over 5,000 accounts of religious experience, and people are,
mm,
I think people are interested in that. Um, but I also think people have always been interested in the supernatural. I think
yes,
that's why
definitely.
That's
Mm,
what. That's why there's religion. That's why there's religion. That's why Jesus,
yeah.
for example, always did miracles first, then
Mm,
preached. And I
mm,
think interesting, that he says, right, come
yeah.
here, look, this. I'm going to heal this person, or I'm going to turn water
Mm,
into wine. And then he would talk, and then he would preach. And I just think, yeah, that's what you do. You get the crowd in, and then you tell them what they should be doing. Um, but that's our
yeah.
fascination with that, with anything
Mm,
bigger than ourselves. Yeah.
mm. And yeah, that's interesting you say that. And I'm just wondering, totally random, but maybe related, whether that's why some people have fairy experiences or
Yeah.
supernatural experiences, that then it's. I was actually interviewing someone the other day that was working with someone. She was doing some one-to-one work with clients that, just wanted to develop an area of themselves, personal development, and she said he needed to experience something physical. She said, even though I work,
Yeah.
mostly on the non-physical side of things and energetically with my work, he wanted to experience something physical. So we received
Yeah.
something, very physical, very much in this dimension that
Yeah.
then gave him that, oh my gosh, this is real.
I
This
believe.
is
Yeah.
the belief
Yeah.
side of things. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's maybe people like us.
mm,
I've had an internal, let's say, experience of fairies through a guided meditation, but I've never physically seen a fairy. But I feel like, well, I'm a done deal. I'm going to
mm,
believe anyway. You don't need to show. I'd love it if they did, but they'd be wasting the energy, wouldn't they? That they could, to use perhaps more cynical or more skeptical people to bring them into the
mm,
material world. I think that's true. Um, it's seeing is believing, isn't it?
mm,
If I see it, I believe it. Or and some of
yeah,
us don't need to be convinced, do we take it on faith, which yeah,
yes.
I've always believed in another dimension, another realm, or
Mm,
parallel world, because I could feel it. I've
mm,
never seen anything, and I'm really glad, because I was terrified of seeing ghosts. I was convinced I was going to, all through my childhood and adulthood as well. But I never
yeah,
have, and I'm really grateful to the
mm,
ghosts for not showing themselves. But it was,
yeah,
I could feel it. I knew that there was something there,
mm,
and I suppose I'm glad I've had the opportunity to explore it, and explore
mm,
it through something so. I don't want to denigrate the other entities out there in the supernatural world, but fairies are so specific and so particular. There's nothing else like them. I mean, there's other things like them in other cultures, but they're recognizable as fairies. But they are so different. They're not religious. They
mm,
tend to get co-opted into religion when religion needs something
mm,
like that. But they're not serving anyone. They have their own agendas. They're unpredictable. And I feel like if you're going to study anything, I mean, everything is interesting, but I think fairies
yes,
are just so particular. And perhaps
mm,
that's it. Um, that's the point. My conclusion has been, well, what are fairies? I don't know. That is the only conclusion.
mm,
Here's what everyone says, and they're all different.
mm,
And then the cultural work is fascinating. I mean, I could have looked at different aspects of culture, but I feel like we do create worlds of enchantment. We do it
mm,
every year at Christmas. You
yes,
do your house up and you
mm,
make it into an enchanted little grotto.
mm,
Um, we we yearn for the past, and so we look
mm,
for nostalgic tellings, and then the spiritual dimension. Um, and I was really interested actually to see how the one ceremony I attended, a fairy
mm,
Wicca thing,
mhm,
very much borrowed from Wicca. In fact, I personally felt that the only thing they changed were the names. It was
mhm.
very much like the casting of a circle and the welcoming of the spirits. But then again, Wicca has also borrowed the names of the elements, so
Yes.
there's a closeness, and I feel like it's coming closer
Mm,
between the two, especially because we're thinking of elementals and
mm.
fairies being elemental beings. Um,
Yes, that's
it's just
interesting as
another,
well, isn't it?
yeah,
There's I've looked at that, these categorizations of fairies,
yes,
and then you've got the elemental aspect, and there are different people
yeah,
that have different beliefs about, oh, well, the gnomes are aligned with the earth, and then that type of fairies related to gnomes, so they're
yes,
part of the
yeah.
earth. So it's a whole other
It is, and it's come full circle. If you
kind of
think the
thing.
Romans and Greeks
Mm,
saw fairies as the dryads, the
yeah. Mm,
Nereids represented a part of nature, and
mm,
then they sort of became like a bit like tramps, like Rumpelstiltskin, or some of the strange
mm,
and wicked characters from fairy tales.
mm,
And then it comes round again with theosophy and with the belief. And theosophy really went to town on the fairies. It was, they were an offshoot of spiritualism, and the teaching comes from that. But it was theosophy that started this, or returned to this idea of the elemental fairy living in a spiritual realm, perceivable only by clairvoyant means, which is interesting as well, sort of putting up a little bit of a barrier to say, well, if you're clairvoyant, you'll see them. And there's lots of that in the Cottingley stories, where these girls, clairvoyant, they can only be clairvoyant. Some of the theosophists said they have to be clairvoyant, but and very sadly, and how unusual to find it in the working classes, which is fascinating. When you can look at Cottingley from so many different ways, and it is about class, it's about snobbery, it's about patriarchy. It's those poor girls. They weren't so nice when they were grown up. I felt like they sort of laughed at the people who believed them. They felt like they'd. But then again, I feel like, well, yeah, good on you, two working class lasses from Bradford, hoodwinked some of the finest minds in the world.
It's such a conundrum, that story, that whole thing. And I mean, with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's involvement as well, and what was he getting from that? He was looking for validation, wasn't he, that these experiences were real.
I think so.
So he was coming from a good place. But it's
I mean, he was interesting because I suppose people draw the correlation and say, oh, Sherlock Holmes would never have believed in fairies, which is probably true. But then again, Sherlock Holmes also said, when you take away the impossible, whatever's left has to be the answer. And I think, yes, that is true. Sherlock Holmes might have said, oh yeah, I believe in fairies because it's the only thing that could be true. And Conan Doyle was interested in spiritualism from his teenage years, and his sort of story was then compounded by the deaths of his son, his first wife, the horror of World War One, which was, I think, that really gave a big push to theosophy, certainly, and to the Cottingley fairies as well, because people had endured the war, and then along comes Spanish flu as well, and it was like we're just being literally plagued. Oh, look, some fairies dancing in a little Yorkshire village. Oh yes, we must all believe it. And I totally get it. And I do, and I like to believe them. I like to believe that they saw something, especially the younger, because there was quite an age difference. The youngest girl she was only 9 when they started, whereas the elder cousin was already 16. She was already ready to go off into the world. And Frances, the younger girl, always said, look, we saw them. I was chasing them around this wood. I'd seen them. She lived in South Africa for most of her childhood, and she said, I've seen them in South Africa. We saw them. And her daughter has said this as well. Mum was convinced. They just couldn't, and it was Elsie sort of wanted to cheer her up. So let's do this then. Let's take some pictures. It's
so it sounds
that need for belief. At a time when everything, I mean, I can't imagine that there was a single family who was not touched by one or other or both of those horrible, catastrophic things. You want to believe, don't you? You want to.
I mean,
that's a big part of fairy belief, is this wanting to believe that something beautiful could exist.
It is. It comes down to this longing we all have. We're all searching for, who are we? It basically comes down to that, isn't it? Who are we? What is this all about?
I mean, exactly. You could easily believe in fairies as believe in some of the scientific principles that we learn about. They're all incredible. I mean, science it's true. Science is extremely wonderful, wondrous.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how it's all put together, how it creates this world that we live in, this universe. Why not believe in fairies? If you can believe that there are billions of worlds out there, if you can believe that we exist, and if the universe was even a tiny fraction different, we couldn't survive, then why can't you believe in fairies? Why can't you believe that there's another dimension? I think we lose, and I do write about this, I think we sometimes go out of our way. And when I say we, I mean humans, out of our way to suck the life out, the wonder out of life. Life is wondrous,
Yes,
it's
it
wonderful,
is.
it's miraculous. So why can't there be fairies?
Yeah.
Why are you drawing the line and saying, well, yes, we have all this wonderful nature, but fairy entities or all of the supernatural things, why draw the line? Let's just believe, because everything is there. I mean, I have to believe in quantum theory. I have no clue at all about how it works, but I have to believe in it. That's a form of belief as well. I trust the physicists know what they're doing, and I believe in their ideas. I'm never going to be able, none of us, certainly not for many thousands of years, we're going to be able to see it, but so
yeah. Wow, thank you. Thank you. We've covered so much,
we
Meri.
have,
It's
and I feel like
amazing.
I've rambled a little bit. I've not really
No,
been very clear, but
it's all been
it's
wonderful.
it's been a fascinating journey, and I don't want it to stop, but in a way I do, because I need a break. I've got my viva, I've got to defend my thesis, and at first I thought it's indefensible, but actually I'm feeling better about it now. I've had a bit of a break.
Yes.
I hope to do it justice. I had a warning at the beginning of my studies. A member of the gypsy and traveller community. I was living in Morecambe at the time,
and
there's a big community of gypsy and traveller people who live there. And I contacted them because they're often associated with fairies. And I had one reply that just said, oh, no, we don't talk to academics because we always get misrepresented. And I thought, well, fair enough. This one woman wrote back to me and said, don't do it. You will be cursed. Fairies don't like being talked about. They don't like being studied. Don't do it. Don't do it. It will be the worst for you. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. And within like a week, catastrophic things started happening to me. But I didn't stop. So I don't know, maybe they've just rewarded maybe they've got something big and horrendous waiting for me. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I'm hoping that I've done them justice. That's what I do.
I think if it's a calling and it's coming from a good place, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah. I'm not trying to say, oh, fairies are evil, stay away. I'm trying to say, look at the fairies. They are this and that, and this is what I think people have shown through their experiences as well, just how fascinating they are. Or how fascinating is it to go just take your dog for your normal walk, and instead of just go for the walk and come back, you see a fairy. I mean,
I know.
it's amazing.
That does happen.
And that's what I hope the fairies will be pleased that I've tried to show them. I mean, I have shown them in their bad light, but they know what they are. They know what they are. We just don't.
No, exactly. I think anything that shines a light on fairies and, is good. So
yes,
that's my opinion.
I've got to say that, and I will continue to. I really hope that they'll see what I've been doing has been not a selfish project, but a genuine desire to know, because isn't that what we're all in this for? We want to find out, we want to discover. It's that human nature of wanting to know. I think that's a good thing, as long as you don't harm anyone.
That's right.
You don't, then I think it's a good thing. So I hope, fingers crossed, I hope they will agree.
Yeah. Is your thesis going to be published at some stage?
Well, I've got to get through my viva, which is at the end of September, and hopefully that will be the end of that. But
Yeah.
my supervisor has always said he thinks it would be a good thing to publish, and he's said that we'll talk about that afterwards, because I think it would be an interesting addition to the
Yeah, I
camp.
think so. Sounds it.
Um,
Yeah. Mm.
so I very much hope that I will be able to publish it. So that's the next steps. Yeah, I hope hopefully doing more things like this too. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking about
Oh,
it, because I
good.
don't get to talk about it at all, except
Yeah.
when very occasionally, if I try to talk, friends and neighbours, they're
Mm.
like, "Oh, really interesting," and then you move on.
Well, that's why I enjoy this podcast as well. Apart
Yeah,
from,
yeah,
spreading the word about fairies, is I meet
yeah,
so many interesting people
yes,
and get to
and
explore different
yeah,
aspects of
yeah. I mean,
fairies.
I
Yeah.
listen to the podcast, and I'm just astounded.
Mm.
Wow, I never some of the people that you've talked to, what they're
Mm.
doing, what they've seen, what they've experienced. It's like it's a whole
Yeah.
universe of
Mm.
beings and beliefs and everything. And I
Mm.
love it, and I love that I'm a tiny part of it, because I never imagined that
Right.
I would be. I was, as I said, it was sheer. Well, it was Google. It was Google sent me to the right place, and
Mm.
from there, it all came out, and
Mm.
it's been good, and I've met some wonderful people. I mean,
Yes.
again, some people not physically.
Mm.
I don't mean in the fairy realm. I mean in the
Mm.
internet realm. But yeah, it's been great, and I want to carry on. So there's lots of little things. There's loads of things I wish I could have put in my thesis that I now think, oh, I could write a paper. I could.
Write a
So
book.
write
Write
another
a
book,
book.
because I have effectively written a
You've
book.
written a book, yeah. So,
Uh, it's
mm.
not short.
Mm.
Good luck, examiners. Read it, every word,
Yes.
and then we'll see.
I'm sure
But
they'll be absolutely blown away. So, thank
I
you.
hope so.
Yeah.
I hope they enjoy it. They've enjoyed it at Lancaster. I have to give a shout out to the
Yeah.
university at
Mm.
Lancaster. They've not had. They say to me they have not had something like this, and I think they've been really complimentary to me about that, just in general, in our department.
Mm.
It's changed now, but I'm in the Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion, and I've had some lovely comments and interest, because
Great.
it is
Yeah.
something different. It's,
Mm.
I know it's not, it's not finding a cure for all the ills of the world, but I hope it's
Mm.
interesting. And I think I've aimed it at people who might not have necessarily, like me, who might not
Mm.
have considered it. But I also want the venerated fairy
Mm.
whisperers to also like it,
Of
and not
course.
be too harsh. So,
Generated.
well, yes, I mean, you are part of some of my research. I've talked
Mm.
about you, and
Oh,
as it
yeah.
because as a representation of this
Mm.
movement towards
Mm.
encouraging relationships with fairies, whereas
Yes.
obviously in the early modern period you'd have been horribly mutilated for
Yes.
for it, and
No.
now it's much prettier and
Thank goodness it's all those
nicer and
times.
pleasant. Yes, it's
Yeah.
but no, I do fully respect yourself and all of the people that have
Thank you.
contributed
Oh.
to my research and my study,
Mm.
because I was starting from a blank canvas, which was good. It was good to only just have my little
Mm.
general knowledge that most people have, and then just meeting so many people, and so many people willing to share it as well, which is
Mm.
great. And as I
Mm.
say, thank God for the internet. I know it probably isn't always the best thing, but
Yeah. No, it's
I can't.
brilliant. Mm.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone being able to do it. I know people have done PhDs without the internet in the past.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know how it would be possible. So, and
Yeah.
that's it. That's good. The
Mm.
fairies know.
Mm.
The fairies probably have been on the internet. Fairies probably invented the internet. Who
Do you know, I
knows?
think they might have. I reckon it's a whole otherworldly
just
conglomeration
just
that's come
whispering into
together.
Elon Musk's ear.
Yeah.
and send you this. Yeah, I don't
I
know.
like that
I
idea.
didn't necessarily want to end on.
Oh, it's lovely. It's been so wonderful speaking with you, Mary,
Thank you,
and
and you,
thank you
Claire.
for your
It's been.
time.
I'm just honoured that you thought it would be worth
Of
me
course.
talking to you. So thank
Yeah.
you for
Yeah.
validating me. I think that's what I
Yeah.
want to say. As I say, I'm the new kid. New kid. I defer to all of you, but I hope I've written something
Oh
that
my
people find of
gosh.
interest, and
Yeah, I'm sure you have. It sounds
forgive
amazing.
my any mistakes. That's
I wish you so much fortune and luck, and
Thank
yeah, I'm
you.
sure the
Same to
fairies
you.
will love it too. So,
Okay.
bye.
Thank you for
Bye for
having me.
now. Thanks for your
Bye.
time. Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Anytime. Bye. Bye.
Bye, Mary. Bye.